There's a feeling all of us have felt at some point in our life, and perhaps particularly over the last few months. It can be paralyzing, it's contagious, and it causes us to keep a death grip on the edge of the cliff of life. That feeling is fear. We've all experienced it in some form or other. For some of us, that fear has been extreme, to the point that we feared for our lives. On Christmas Eve 1998, I was driving back to my apartment after spending the evening with my mom at the house where I grew up. It was late. I was one of the only people out on the freeway. It was a freezing cold, cloudless night. All of a sudden, at about 70 miles an hour, my SUV hit black ice and began a slow spin. Now, I get it that many of you have probably experienced something much more terrifying, but for me, that was one of the more fear-filled moments of my life. There was nothing I could do. I had no control. Eventually, I crashed into the concrete wall that divides the freeway and came to a stop, luckily with no injuries. Obviously, fear washes through us when we feel our life is in danger. In that moment, we become focused on ourselves. No one else matters. Self-preservation kicks in. And of course, that can often be really useful. It's the freeze, fight, or flight mechanism, and it's designed to save our life. But fear also kicks in when our life isn't threatened. That fear can be a fear of loss. Loss of something that's really important to us, loss of our reputation, loss of our status, or loss of our livelihood. It could also be the fear of trying something new with our business. The fear of taking a leap into the relative unknown by doing something no one has ever tried. We put a lot of time, energy, and resources into it, not to mention having others rely on us for an income at the same time, all while not knowing for sure that it will work. Now, thanks to the fact that our brains process everything in terms of life or death, our natural reaction to these non-life-threatening situations can actually mirror the instinct we have in a life-threatening situation. We can quickly find ourselves closing down, focusing on ourselves and our own survival, as we try to protect what's important to us. The fear of loss can quickly be accompanied by other feelings too, like anger, frustration, or looking for someone or something to blame. When we're gripped by fear, our attitude to risk changes too. Instead of seeing the opportunity to soar through the air, we only see the sharp rocks on the cliff below. Instead of seeing new possibility, we're more likely to only see scarcity as we try to hold on to what we already have at all costs. In business, that often looks like protecting market share or the bottom line. At one extreme of fear, we might become filled with self-doubt. At the other extreme, some of us might find ourselves being driven by ego as we kick against the problem and anyone we see is standing in our way. However fear shows up in these situations, it comes down to one thing. It's about self first. After all, the word ego is Latin for I. And here's the problem. When leading through a crisis, a major challenge, or a new venture, if we allow ourselves to be driven by any form of fear, it's neither sustainable nor empowering. Trust quickly evaporates, we stop caring for our people, we focus more and more on the numbers, stress goes up, we induce fear in others, innovation and engagement suffer as those around us start to close down too. We can even cause a sense of paralysis as those on our team begin to focus on their own survival rather than supporting one another. Ultimately, in these situations, fear holds us back. It actually gets in our way. So, what can we do about it? After all, experiencing fear is human nature. It's totally understandable. In this context, we need to start by recognizing fear for what it is. It's a warning. My dear friend Peter was a pilot in the British Royal Air Force for 25 years. In a conversation with him a while back, he mentioned that as a pilot, when you have an engine fire in a large aircraft, an absurdly loud bell goes off and a big red light flashes in your face. And if you let that continue, you literally can't hear yourself think. So the first thing they do as pilots is turn off the bell. Essentially, they turn off the fear. The bell has done its job. They know there's a fire. Like the engine fire bell, recognizing fear as just a warning allows us to acknowledge the danger and gives us the opportunity to choose to harness something even more powerful than fear itself. something that will propel us forward rather than hold us back. And importantly, something that will carry our team forward with us too. This brings me to another powerful feeling we've all felt at some point in our lives. Love. Now, many of us might shy away from talking about love in a business context. It's a little hippy-dippy for some, I get it. So for those of you who still struggle using that word at work, let's get out of our preconceptions a little bit and broaden what we mean by love. When we're driven by love, it means that we're driven by something greater than ourselves. It's about lifting others up, not about lifting ourselves up. It's about seeing possibility rather than scarcity. It's a stand for something rather than a position against something. It's about leading with humble confidence rather than with ego. It's sort of like a bus with love on one side and fear on the other. At any given time, and in any given situation, the drivers of fear and love are trying to jump into the driver's seat. We always have a choice which one takes control. We can let fear grab hold of the wheel, or we can choose to get love in there instead. I happen to believe that we're all born with a capacity for love. In fact, it's our default. A newborn child is extremely vulnerable and instinctively puts its trust and survival in the hands of others. A young child on the playground will naturally embrace other kids, regardless of race, gender, or any other demographic. They see the world as a place of creativity and opportunity without restriction. But interestingly, the society humankind has built is not like that. Ironically, even though we're all born with the capacity to be driven by love, the world we've created is one where fear frequently takes the lead. In many common situations, the world has normalized fear drivers like scarcity, judgment, and competition. Think about it. At school, we're encouraged to get ahead, to get the best grades, to look a certain way, dress a certain way, and be accepted by the right crowd. In order for us to win, someone else has to lose, or at least that's what we're told. And it continues as we move on to college, competing for a spot at the best school or in the most sought-after program. And that's just the beginning. We graduate, and then we go to work. We compete with others as we go after the best jobs with the best companies, and it doesn't end there. Once we actually get the job, then we're worried about how much our boss likes us, if we're on the list for a promotion, or if we'll even get to keep our jobs when times are tough. In other words, the need to push ahead, often at the expense of others, is ingrained in us by society. This is why it's sometimes so difficult to default back to love. We've been trained to react from a place of fear. Now, the key to all this is the bridge between fear and love. And that bridge is courage. Courage can't exist without fear. Fear is the trigger for courage. But courage can only be sustained through love. Let me explain that and test it out with a couple of examples. On 9/11, when the firefighters and other first responders arrived at the scene and saw the smoke and flames, I have to believe there was some initial reaction of fear. But because of their commitment to saving the lives of others, they allowed that fear to trigger the courage that it took to put their own lives on the line in service of something bigger than themselves. That's love. Now, we all get it when there are dramatic examples like this one. But what does it look like to be driven by love rather than fear as a business leader in times of pressure or crisis? A client of mine recently told me a story of his experience with this. He was an executive at a large software company. When COVID hit, each executive was told they needed to cut $1 million worth of expense from their respective businesses. Now, the implied message was to decide who they were going to lay off. Well, this guy, we'll call him Jeff, decided to take a little different approach. He called an all-hands meeting with all 1,000 of the people in his care. He told them what they were up against and said that all of the leaders in that particular business unit had volunteered to take 1 week unpaid every month for the next 3 months. That made up for a little more than half of the $1 million they needed to save. They'd also spun up a website where anybody who wanted to could sign up to take voluntary unpaid time off or give up some of their PTO to ensure that everyone in the business unit got to keep their jobs. In the end, they were able to exceed their goal of $1 million. That's love. Now, when the CEO heard how Jeff had handled the situation, he called him into his office and berated him for what he had done. The CEO's immediate thought, along with a few of the other executives, was, I hope they're not expecting us to take any unpaid time off too. That's fear. That's not who Jeff is, so he jumped. He resigned from his secure position and is now leading a team at a different company and leading from a place of love. I've jumped several times in my own life. Every single time there was fear. Fear of not being able to provide for my family. Fear of not finding work that would make the difference I wanted to make in the world. Fear of the unknown. What helped me overcome that fear and gave me the courage to go on despite all the bumps along the way was love. Love for my family, love for people, love for what I stand for and what I talk about. Because of that focus on love, almost all of those jumps have taken me higher. When something that's really important to us is on the line, we always have a choice between love and fear. Often that choice is really scary because there's a cliff in front of us. But we can all choose to use that fear as a catalyst for courage to be driven by love. Love of our people. Love of what we bring to the world through the work we do. Love of our industry. When we do this, we open up more possibility, more solutions, more creativity and innovation, both from ourselves and our team. Now, perception is everything. When we're standing on the edge, we can look down and see all the things that might hurt us. Or we can look up and out and see the possibilities of where we'll fly. One perception is driven by fear, the other is driven by love. And love triumphs over fear, hands down, every time. It's simply a choice.